Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Grow Wealthy Grooming. I'm your host, River Lee, founder of the Savvy Groomer, where we teach you guys to go from being burnt out, broken, to healthy, wealthy, and happy, building a grooming business on your terms. So I want to welcome a special guest. Actually, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Jim Atchison. I'm an attorney based out of Rhode Island and work a lot with River on the grooming industry and providing services for the grooming industry and helping groomers make money and grow their business.
I love it. Yes, I welcome Jim because I felt like this was a great topic to have an attorney here and give his perspective, because I know he does a lot with employment law and general business practices. So let's go ahead and hop on to today's topic. So we're going to talk about what percentage of commission is fair for pet groomers. I feel like I'm stepping on a landmine. It's all fine. You know, it's a little tough because I feel like, again, like, saying what's fair is kind of a loaded question. I mean, you know, I'm sure in your business dealings, everyone has a different opinion about what is fair, right?
Yep. Yeah, what's fair to one, it might not be fair to the other. And what's fair from the perspective of a business owner may not be considered fair from the perspective of the employee. But a lot of times on the employee side, it's not understanding how a business operates.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because first things first I want to talk about is overhead. And overhead is the bills that the business needs to pay, guys. That's, you know, things like rent, shampoos. Technically that's a consumable, but let's not go down that road yet. It's really anything that you're purchasing for the business, right? Again, things like recurring, things like software. And I would say overhead realistically can be anywhere between, I've seen it as low. I mean, you could have almost no overhead, you do like 5%, but I've seen it on average between 15 to 25% realistically. What other things should a business owner consider when they're thinking about how to start allocating money in their business?
Sure. One of the most important things, but also one of the most difficult to allocate is for taxes, which basically means, you know, the money that you have to pay to the government in order to operate your business. Depending on your state, your locality, and other factors, you're probably going to be spending anywhere between 10 to 25% of the money you take in to go toward taxes. For example, I pay somewhere between 20 and 25% of my gross income to taxes. State and federal, they may be local taxes too. So in order to accommodate that, I usually recommend putting away about 25% for taxes. That way you can give yourself a little bit of a tax refund at the end of the year without having to come up with some cash in order to make that payment right away. I say it's difficult to manage though, because typically you don't have to pay the taxes right away. You can start collecting money, you know, in January, if that's when your tax year starts, and you don't actually have to pay the taxes until April 15th of next year. And it's very hard, especially as a small business owner or an entrepreneur to have the discipline to really set that money aside. So it can be very hard to manage. And one thing about tax debt is that if you don't pay it, or if you owe it, the government's not going to stop coming after you for it. You know, it doesn't go away, and they're going to charge you interest, and you wind up in a hole that you have a lot of difficulty getting out of. Another expense that you're going to have that's important to make sure is paid is payroll. You have to have a payroll company, you have to have workers' compensation, you have to withhold the state and local taxes for your employees. In New England, you know, it's anywhere between a minimum of 10% to 15%, could go as high as 25% to 30%. In places like California, some of the more high tax jurisdictions. And one thing that's important to remember too is that, you know, when you receive a paycheck, there are deductions for things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid that the employee pays. But on top of that, there's an equal amount that the employer has to pay, and that isn't passed along to the employee. So you have to make sure that you reserve and withhold those funds as well. A certified public accountant should be able to help you kind of figure out these rates to make sure that you're withholding enough, or you could work with a payroll processor that will take care of that for you. But I think almost equally as critical to taxes is making sure that your payroll is being taken care of, especially withholdings you have to make on employees' payroll and submit to state and local and federal taxing authorities, because those can become a personal liability of you if those payments aren't made. Sales tax as well and stuff like that. You're holding those funds essentially in trust to give to the government. So if you misuse those and don't pay it, you can wind up in a lot of trouble personally.
No, I've heard that. I've heard of many groomers getting like very high fines and everything from not paying taxes, or, you know, and a lot of times they'll take that money in their account and they'll pay things like overhead, or they'll put payroll, where they're just trying to keep afloat and they'll accidentally spend those funds. So that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and borrow from it too, you know, maybe say, all right, I just need to use these funds that I reserve for taxes this week to buy some product that I need, but I'll be able to catch up with it, you know, next week or next month. And then you kind of constantly wind up in the catch up game until you realize, you know, you're in a hole that's going to be almost impossible to get out of.
No, I see that happen over and over and over again, where a groomer, you know, a grooming business owner, that's essentially what happens, right? Is they're maybe a little bit slow and they still got to pay their groomer, right? And they've still got to pay their rent and all of those things, or their van payment or whatever. So, you know, Jim, I don't know if we've really talked about this, but it's not uncommon for the industry to do 50% commission. And when I say 50% commission, that is gross profit, not 50% net. That is not profit sharing. So that's really important. Do you want to explain what gross profit is?
Sure. In the most simple terms, when you do a groom and it costs $100, the $100 that you make and hopefully are paid right then and there, that's your gross profit. That's the money someone gives you that comes into the business.
All right. And I think that it's really clear that we distinguish gross versus net profit. I know some of you guys may or may not know that. What's a really simple way to understand net profit?
That's the money you get to keep after paying your overhead, your taxes, your payroll, other expenses, you know, other money that has to go out the door. The net profit, that's actually how much you really make.
Yeah, so I think explaining that is really going to help us understand what is fair when it comes to commission. I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at you guys, so just be prepared. And I'm hoping that my teammate here will actually put the numbers down below. So we're going to use these numbers in our example. We're going to say the overhead for your business is 25% of your gross profit, okay? We're going to be very generous and say Uncle Sam is only taking 15% for your taxes. And then we're also going to do 50% for your groomer's pay, right? At some point, we're going to talk about owner's draw. So let's say right now there is no owner's draw, okay? So that means 90%, right, of that. Yeah, so that only leaves us 10%, right? And I think that sounds like a lot till we actually look at some grooming numbers. So I know, Jim, you work in different industries, but let me be very frank. Sometimes groomers are not charging a lot. So just to put it in perspective, guys, let's say you're going to do $45 groom, right? That would mean that your 10% net profit is $4.50. $50, $5. 65, $6.50. 75, $7.50. And $100, that means that that grooming business owner is only making $10 net profit.
Kind of insane when you think about it.
I mean, that's just it, right? I mean, and again, looking at the $100 price point, which you guys have often heard me talking about, right? If we even just drop that commission by, let's say, 40%, so we're going to get the extra 10% to have 20% net profit, it's $20 net profit, right? And again, it's not a lot, it's better, right? But it's still not a lot of money when you consider all of the risk and all of, especially after COVID and everything that people have done in order to run their businesses.
Yeah, and if you think about it, the other difficult part about having a margin that small is that even if you have a couple of weeks where maybe you had to shut down for some reason, there was an issue with the building, you still have to pay your overhead. You still have to pay your rent. You still have to pay your electric. The expenses don't stop, and that's the big risk that comes from being the owner versus being an employee.
Yeah, I knew a lot of groomers that during COVID, or I mean, it could be something as small as like having a water heater issue or having like it be snowing and you can't go anywhere. Or if you have a van and you guys have a generator issue and the van just sits there for 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, you still got to pay that van payment, you still got to pay the rent. You know, it doesn't stop. Like you can't stop paying your business insurance just because you're closed, unfortunately.
Mhm. So, of all the money that's allocated, which one do you think is the most important?
Which one do you think is the most important?
The owner's profit, of course. I mean, that's why we do it. If it was someone who wants to groom just for the love of grooming, well, then you could do friends and family, for free and pop over their houses and do stuff. But
Or rescue, right? Or
yeah,
rescue
go
for
to
fun.
rescue. I mean, there are plenty of good opportunities to groom if you love grooming and you're not concerned about having a business, or you don't want the stress to have it. But if you're the person that's going to put your butt on the line, if you're going to personally sign leases and stuff like that, or maybe have to guarantee stuff, you better be paid for it, or else you're just taking a risk without getting any reward, and you're making other people money without making you any money.
Yeah, I don't. Are you familiar with the book Profit First at all?
No.
Okay. Well, really quickly, guys. So they actually suggest putting the owner's draw first, the owner's profit first. And they start really small with like 1%. And again, I just want to remind you guys that that's you paying yourself for owning your business. It's basically like getting a little bit of money for investing. So if you invested in the stock market, you would make money. If you bought a house and you rented it out, you would want to make a profit, right? You want to make some money off of that. And what's sad, guys, too, is that you would not have your money in the stock market if it only made 1%. But let's just take that for a second, right? So let's imagine again that $100 groom, right? That means that groomer getting that 1%, that's $1.
Yep.
If you did
Yeah.
2%, that's $2.
Mhm.
I mean, that's an incredibly pathetic return on investment. You would not invest $100 in the stock market if it made you $1.
No, that's exactly right. Again, because of what you're putting at risk. And I think it's also important to make sure that, you pay yourself through the owner's draw, because, if you're doing work and you're putting all this effort in and not making any money doing it, yeah, you're going to be frustrated. I would. And that's going to hurt, maybe your services, maybe the focus you want to put in it. Where at least if all right, here's the money that's coming in. Now, what can I do to grow this business to make it run more efficiently so I can increase this number? That's a better motivation, I think, to have. And there's nothing wrong with, being motivated by making a lot of money. Everybody's entitled to do it.
Well, I think especially now that we're seeing so many businesses close and so many people getting out of the industry, I think a lot of it is because especially owners right now are not making any money. They're either breaking even or they're actually losing money. It's crazy.
Yep. And payroll and wages can be a big part of that. And is also an expense that can be controlled. At the end of the day, we don't set the tax rate. We don't set the electric rate. We don't set the price of shampoo and stuff like that. But we do set our own payroll, and we do set our own payroll practices. So that's a big expense that you can exercise some control over in order to make the business both profitable and efficient. Because in some cases, like I know I've heard that, I think like Petco and PetSmart and kind of the big ones, pay their groomers like something like crazy, like 50% or whatever.
Well, like I said, that's pretty normal, unfortunately, in the industry right now. And in a perfect world, we'd keep our payroll under 30%. And I think it's important to understand what's fair because, of course, I feel like I'm stuck in the middle, right? I feel like on some level, I'm sitting here going, I want to be fair to the groomers because they're working their butts off and they're working really hard. And then on the flip side, I want to be fair to the owners because they're putting all the investment and the hard earned, and they're like really putting things on the risk, because if shit doesn't work out, guess what? It's their name and their like all of their livelihood right there. If I'm a groomer and I lose my job, I can get a job anywhere. If I'm a business owner and I have put up $100,000 for this business, or, gotten a second mortgage, or, signed a lease that I have to pay for the next 5 years, or pay a giant penalty, right? And I think it's really important for everyone in the industry, and even, you, I know you have a dog. I understand, like, PetSmart and Petco pay their groomer 50% commission, and they have like these $35 bath specials. They have like the same wages, they have the same grooming prices. I feel like as an industry as a whole, but especially Petco, PetSmart, have kept like the average Shih Tzu groom price at like $45 for the last like 20 years. And I want to mention that like places like that, they don't worry about it. And I want you to remember this too, guys. So you have to remember, like, so if we as an industry consider like Petco, PetSmart the same as like Fantastic Sam's and Supercuts, right? We wouldn't worry about how much they charge, right? We wouldn't worry about it. And it's really important that we don't, because they actually already have that overhead, right, guys? That overhead is not a lot of big difference for them. They already have the building, they're already paying the rent, they're already paying the heat, they're already paying the electricity. For them, it's actually really easy because it's a loss leader. I mean, that's what it is, right? They don't care.
And for anyone who doesn't know what a loss leader is that's a service a business provides that they don't make any profit on. They may lose money on it, but it gets the customer into the door. It gets them in there, and then they sell, the other products to them and kind of hit them over the head. Gas stations operate the same way. That's why most of them have a big convenience store, because they don't make any money off the gas. They make money off of the, $3 you have to spend for a bag of Sun Chips.
I didn't even realize that, but that makes so much sense, because yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. I know the same thing with McDonald's, like their French fries and their soda is so cheap. They can sell the soda for $1 because it costs them pennies. And they make their money doing other things. They make their money doing stuff like that. So anyway, I digress. And I think what we have to understand as an industry is that the majority of us can't afford to lose money or break even, right? We really need to, make a profit, and we need to make money. A lot of grooming business owners, the only way they make money is if they're grooming. So they're basically, they're just basically grooming and working for themselves. And what I think we don't ever really talk about is, in a perfect world, you guys would be setting aside at least 15% for savings and sinking funds and emergency fund. And I like to see you guys have a minimum of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, ideally 6 months to a year, unless if you own your building or own your van outright. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the world has been in an upheaval for 2 years now, right?
At least. And you don't want to have to go into debt with credit cards or something else to pay for an emergency or other unexpected expenses. And then you wind up, again, paying off that debt over a period of time at a high interest rate and eating into your profit.
I mean, even just from a personal side, I think what people don't understand is, like, during COVID, I had so many people message me as the Savvy Groomer saying, I took out all these loans, I took out an extra mortgage, I took out all these things to save my business during COVID. And not only do they not have a grooming business, now they have a pile of debt for business they lost. And you're like, can't they file for bankruptcy? Well, it depends if it's attached to things. And you guys understand, if you file for bankruptcy, it's 7 years. That's the end of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly right.
But anyway, I digress. So let's take your 50%, commission with your 15% overhead, which is at least, and your low profit margin. What happens that I find is a lot of groomers don't even bother filing taxes, and they end up with these illegal independent contractors. So they don't pay any of these payroll costs, right? They don't pay a CPA. They just like take the money under the table and all of that. And unfortunately, it's true, like they can't afford these payroll costs because either they're losing money. I've had so many students, I can't even tell you, that are running their businesses illegally because they're just, if they run them legally, they're not profitable. They'll either lose money or they're going to break even, which is crazy. No one should ever work full-time in their business and break even.
No, that's exactly right. And there are bad, real life consequences of doing this too. One, a lot of people think that by paying the employees under the table or as independent contractors, they're doing them a favor by, letting the employee keep all their money. Well, a couple problems with that. One, if you're paying someone under the table and you're paying them cash, that's really hurting you because you don't get to then deduct all that money that you paid from the business. So, you're getting, let's just say $100 and you're paying out 30% to the person, the groomer that did the groom. Well, you can't tell the government about that because it's under table. So you wind up paying taxes on that 30%, even though you didn't get to keep the money. The other issue is that, for the most part, independent contractors, as groomers and as, essentially full-time or full-time like employees is almost always illegal. The independent contractor designation is really designed by people like your plumber, an electrician, people who have their own business. They come to your place to do some work. They have a lot of control over how they operate. You pay them and they leave. If it's a situation where you have a groomer and they're not working at any other grooming locations, they're not doing any other jobs, they're essentially doing this full time. That's not an independent contractor. There isn't any independence there. That's a full-time employee. And if you get caught, by the Department of Labor or by state departments of labor, you can wind up in a very expensive and time-consuming lawsuit that can in fact put you out of business, result in some personal liability. And in many cases, you might have to pay double or triple what would have been owed because they weren't properly classified. And no one could agree to work as an independent contractor. It's a test that the IRS uses to determine if it's an independent contractor or not. And it doesn't matter that they said they wanted to be an independent contractor. If they're operating like an employee, you have to pay them like an employee.
No, that's a lot of food for thought. I will say I appreciate like the legal logic brain. I will say from my heart and my heart center, again, because I do get these messages, guys, I can't even tell you how many people message me horror stories. One thing I want to remind you is that if you have an employee and her face gets ripped off or she's permanently disabled, permanently disfigured, and she's under the table or she's an illegal independent contractor, there's no workers' comp. There's nothing, how are you going to feel? At least if there's someone to sue, which is the workers' comp insurance, hopefully this person's going to get these things helped with. Hopefully they're going to get some money considering they're never going to work again. I cannot tell you how many times it happens where somebody is working for someone and their whole life is destroyed and they're working under the table, or, they're just working in the wrong capacity. And that's really tough. It's just,
In most circumstances, having someone an independent contractor is bad for both the employer and the employee, because on that point too, another thing you don't get when you're an independent contractor generally, although they're changing it now, is unemployment insurance. If you're an independent contractor and the place where you're working has to lay you off, you're not an employee, so you can't get unemployment insurance.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. I think that COVID again makes it I know. And again, if you're like, okay, well then what is fair, right? If 50% isn't fair, 40% isn't fair, then what is fair? Well, let's start with the fact that, again, I don't think that, groomers deserve less than they deserve, right? I hate the term, charge what you're worth. I think that's kind of toxic. But I know you need a livable wage. I know you deserve more than enough. I know that you deserve to either become wealthy or at least pretty damn comfortable, right? But the reason business owners can't give you 50% gross wages is because they simply can't afford it, guys. They just can't. Okay. It's bad for their business. And if you're a business owner and you're paying 50% and you're not seeing the profit margin you need, it's because of that. Okay. Even if it's just 10%, right? And ideally on some of you guys that are paying 50, 60, 70, I've seen 75% for some of these like grooming business managers. They can't afford it, guys. They really can't. Even just that 20% difference is a huge difference for the business, because now they have money to pay things like pay off their debt, make a savings fund, updating equipment, guys, making their employees have a paid vacation, maybe being able to afford things like healthcare, or sort of adding money to your retirement. This is why, guys, businesses have to make money, and owners need to make a little bit of money too. They need to make money for just owning the investment. We have so many people closing their grooming businesses because they would actually do better if they put that $100,000 instead of into a grooming van into the stock market and just got a W-2 job, guys. That's nuts. I just want you to think about that. They could go take that $100,000 instead of buying a van, put in the stock market, and get a job at Petco and be making more money. That's so not fair. And they deserve more. And you as a groomer deserves more. So how are we going to do this, right? How are we going to deal with that? And don't forget, guys, that business owner is also doing things they're not getting paid for, like marketing, reception work. They're taking all the risk, right?
That's exactly right. And that's why it's so important that a business makes a profit, whether or not you're working in it. That's the main point of the business, to make money. And it's important too, think about it in this perspective. If I were to give you the choice of saying, hey, let's become partners and we'll split the money we make 50-50, or you can be my employee and I'll give you 50% of the profit, but you have none of the risk, none of the admin, none of the stuff that I as the owner have to deal with. Which job would you take? Who's got the better job at that point? And it's the employee, because they're getting 50%, which is a pretty good cut of every dollar that comes in, without having any of the risk that the owner's dealing with. And that's not fair.
No, it's not. And again, I don't know much about partnerships and law firms, but I mean, it's not like they get 50% and they had to pay a lot of money to get in.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you're responsible for the debt. If you can't make pay an expense that week, you got to come out of pocket for it. Where an employee, you got to pay me once a week, every other week, no matter what.
Yeah. And I think that's just it. It's just not fair. If there's no profit, they either own their job, right? Or they own a hobby, and it's not a long-term plan. So the question of like, what's a fair commission? And I'm going to make everyone mad. And I'm going to say that hourly, 30% or less is the fair, right? And it's because as an industry, long-term, we need to figure out that salon owners, mobile owners, business owners can make a profit, invest in the business, invest in their employees, create long-term wealth, right? And then support their employees for them to create long-term wealth. And to me, that is all about groomers raising their prices, right? Because if you're charging $100 for a dog and that groomer is taking an hour to groom that dog, that means that you could pay that groomer $30 an hour, right? But if they just do commission, I do think that it's so bad for us as an industry. If you're focused on making more money in commission, you're going to keep burning yourself out if you're an employee, because you're going to be focused on doing more and more and more dogs. Jim, I know this is a little off topic, but you were gracious enough to be in with me with group mentoring, and you saw someone that they were doing their best trying to support their groomer. And we figured out at 50%, that groomer was making what, like $16 an hour?
Yep.
Yeah, because when we added up the hours, guys, compared to like how much they were charging what, $83 a dog?
I believe it was, yeah. Yeah.
So again, the commission is less important. It's more of how much is the owner charging for the grooms. And if you're an owner, you need to be charging enough that your employees can earn a livable wage on 30% or less. That is our responsibility. And as an industry, we have to step up to the plate.
Exactly right. And one thing I'll note too is, I know you call it the price increase, which is true, but I would also call it's the price correction. program too, because really what you're doing is, you're making a price that's fair to everybody. It's, fair to the customer in terms of, they're not being gouged for some ridiculous profit. Fair to the groomer, because now you're in an ability to pay them more, even if it's not off of a commission, because you're making fair money coming in. And fair to you as the business owner, you're putting it all on the line and doing all the work and staying up those late nights and sweating about paying bills and stuff like that. You deserve to be compensated for that. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's why we go into business.
Absolutely. And on the same, I think that's the thing, is that we have to figure out what's fair. And I think it's so interesting. I see so many people posting in these Facebook groups, and I've been bringing Jim along for the ride because he was gracious enough to help me do a lot of things on the back end. We're going to be doing a lot for groomers. I'm so excited. But it was amazing that how many of them say I wouldn't work less for 50%. And it's like, okay, well, how much is that an hour? How much is that a year? Right? How much is that? And I don't think most of us know. And we're so focused on what a fair commission rate is instead of what is a fair salary? What is a fair hourly wage? Right? I think as an industry, we need to shift the focus to that. And I know that's going to make a lot of people really upset, right? Because we want to hear 50%. We want to hear 40%. But it comes down to what is fair for the business owner and then what is fair for the groomer. And I think that's where creating those connections. And it's so funny. You're so right. Yeah, I think that's just it. It just comes down to, as an industry, we just have to completely start from scratch. You really do. And that's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that we're going to have to sit down as an industry and say, okay, how are we going to fix this? My belief is hourly plus bonuses. I know, Jim, you work with a lot of companies that have had to go away from commission and move towards hourly. And I'd love to sit down and have a bigger conversation about, how do you do that? And how does that look like? I know that's really your expertise, and I would love to discuss that more with you another day. I know, guys, I wish we had more time, but I feel like we have, maybe not come up with a solid answer of what's fair, but I think we've started the conversation. I think that's more important, right? I think that if you're a groomer listening to this, I hope this makes you feel more compassionate for your business owners. And I feel like if you are a business owner and you're feeling frustrated, go look at your KPIs, go look at your metrics, go see what's going on. And like Jim said, my price increase masterclass, he does call it the price corrector class. And it's absolutely true. I've also had people call it the price recalculation, right? Because a lot of you guys have kind of picked numbers out of thin air, right? And so we can't keep winging it. We got to get this done. We got to get the prices right. So I just want to leave you guys with that knowledge. And Jim, do you have any final thoughts? I know you're speaking to an industry that you're learning a lot about, and I really appreciate your expertise and your insight.
No, I would only say, look, focus on this and other things to make the money that you deserve. But part of what we're talking about is what do the groomers deserve? But the other part of that is, what do you deserve?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that, there's a big difference, there's a big conversation about what's greediness, what's entitlement, et cetera. I think it's ultimately what makes you happy. If you're a W-2 grooming employee, you have to understand that more and more people are becoming solopreneurs because it's just not profitable to add another person, and we do need to fix it as an industry. But that starts with not asking for 50% gross profit, not expecting 50% gross profit, because not even doctors and attorneys get 50% gross profit as a partner. The
economics wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't. And so I think as an industry, we're seeing the collapse of that, right? So we're going to have to work on that. So thank you, Jim, so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I want to thank everyone here for joining me for this episode of Grow Wealthy Grooming. Be sure to visit me at my website, savvygroomer.com. And you can see my current opportunities to work with me and grow your pet grooming business. Plus, there's lots of free resources, guys. I literally have hundreds of hours for free on YouTube. Please just binge me, listen to me rant. It's fun. I'm fun. I'm adorable. Listen, it's all good.
Then you get to see Fire in the background sometimes.
I know. And my cat Fire, who, if financially independent, retire early over here is being a real jerk. I mean, listen, I feel like half the reason you guys watch my videos is this guy. He literally sits here. Like, this is what he does.
He's a ham.
You know, he wants attention. He's funny too, because he kept trying to come up, guys. And I was like gently pushing him away. What are you going to do, right? And if you guys are looking for a community of like-minded groomers, check out my free Facebook group, Savvy Pet Professionals. So guys, as always, I really appreciate you being here. This was the really tough question that I don't feel like we really answered, but we've started the conversation all about what percentage of commission is fair for pet groomers. As always, guys, happy grooming.
Bye now.